Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Pat. Very conscious of the edge back here behind me.
You're fine. You've got a bit of room there. So, Adrian, why did you choose to leave a good, safe job with a good future in Dell to start a startup?
I suppose I suppose from a very young age I always wanted to do something myself. And then when I went to university and doing computer science, there was a very kind of entrepreneurial spirit there, and a lot of my friends and we always had ideas that would change the world. But I suppose reality then really sunk in when I was in Dell, and this idea of starting a business was always a great idea. But it just seemed a lot easier to go into industry, take a job in a multinational. The money was good, steady, you had regular hours, all that, and coming straight out of college, that was attractive. But then I think when they closed the factory in Dell, and my eyes were kind of opened to grown men crying openly, at the news. And I couldn't get my head around it. I really just couldn't understand it. For me, I was being, I was only in the door maybe a year and a half, so I wasn't being, one of those that was being let go. But just seeing people who had been there for 20, 25 years just crying like children, and I was just appalled by it. I was taken aback, and I understood why. And the reason is that they had been so institutionalized and so focused on this, they had nothing else. They had become their job, they had become that, and they had been really consumed by an American multinational, and they didn't know what to do outside of that. And that for me kind of worried me, and it kind of woke me up to the fact that, number one, I don't want that to happen to me, and number two, I want to be in control of what happens to me and the people I work with. So that was a big catalyst, I can tell you. So I kind of, on that basis then, I made it known to management that I was keen to take a package and leave, and I swapped with one of the guys who I comforted. So he kept his job, and that was positive. He, I don't think he would have ever found employment again if he ever left, because he was in such a very, very, very specialised field. Certainly not in Ireland anymore.
And did your idea for a startup come from the role you were in? Did you see a problem that needed solving?
Yeah, it did. I suppose, look, I've always been involved in doing something positive, particularly around climate change and the environment. I was that kid in school that started picking up cans and telling lads to stick it in the recycling bin, and I was that annoying kid that was telling my dad to stop throwing stuff around the place and actually to start recycling, and that was kind of me. But
you were ahead of your time.
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it was just I don't know what it was, but I think the idea of combining technology with something like climate change and sustainability and carbon footprint reporting and energy efficiency just kind of made a lot of sense to me. And I suppose in the lead up to that, I had gone through a few iterations of kind of looking at stuff of ways of kind of starting a business. And in college, for example, one that my friends reminded me of recently at a stag party, because they actually pulled one out, was I imported about 1,000 breathalyzers from China, and stuck stickers on them and sold them to all the pharmacies around Dublin. Made a little fortune for myself, and that was kind of, I felt good in one sense, because it was around the time that the breath testing was coming in for that, and they sold like hotcakes. And but I think what really got me down was I saw pictures then of the factory where they were created, and that just lost all meaning. Then I just didn't want to do it anymore, and I just stopped doing it. Even though there was loads of demand there, I just couldn't.
Ethically,
morally, whatever way you want to look at it. Yeah, pictures came out of that, not specifically that factory, but a company that runs that, and there was just appalling conditions, and I just couldn't be part of it. But so from that perspective, then I said, if I'm going to do something, I've clearly got something here that, I've got an ability to do something. I've spotted this. I was able to do that, made a lot of money doing it. Little or no effort. I mean, really, I even had the pharmacies collecting it from me. I didn't even have to deliver it to them, which would have been difficult on my bike in university as well. So I had a bit of fun with that, but 2 or 3 months in of that, and I just said no, forget about it.
So it was your version of Zuckerberg's sandwich run or whatever in college?
No, I wouldn't say it was. Yeah, no, I had a web page and everything, so it was a bit more advanced.
Okay. So initially you set up as Managed CO2?
Yeah, so we founded Managed CO2. It seemed like a good idea at the time to call it that. It was very much a project name. We had to, I suppose we were trying to get onto the LEAP program and trying to get in to talk to Enterprise Ireland and the County Enterprise Board and stuff like that. And we were also trying to talk to potential investors and potential partners. And we kind of needed a name.
So the LEAP program was the forerunner of the current New Frontiers program, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. So before we ever started anything, we had a chat with them and we kind of understood, what was involved. And one of the key things for any of these, government agencies to kind of recognize you is you need to have a company name, at least, or at least call yourself something. So we went through lots of iterations, YAGIO being one of my favorite ones that I laugh about, which stood for Yet Another Greenhouse Gas Emissions System.
Obviously.
Yeah. It was a bit of a mouthful, and it was a fantastic idea at the time, as I said, but Managed CO2, what I actually did, and I know lots of people suffer with this, is trying to find a good name for a company. So what I did was I registered on a company where, I registered on a website where as domains get dropped by other people. So you have loads of people obviously out there that are buying up domains just on the hope that somebody will buy one off them. And so I just came across this, signed up to it, and every morning while working in Dell, I get this email. I was like, nope. And then managedco2.com has been dropped. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do as a project name in the interim until we find a proper name. But we kept it for 5 years. So
good tip.
Yeah, no, that's a super website. I can't think of the name of it now, but there's a few of them out there. And then we rebranded to Accuvio then mainly because we had expanded well beyond CO2. And actually the kind of conversations we were having with customers was, hi, we're Managed CO2. Oh no, we're okay for our CO2, thanks. But can you help us on our waste and water? And of course we also did the waste and water and a wide variety of things. So we said that a name change then was kind of imminent and was needed. So I suppose to give a bit of history, right? So one of the things we spotted in the industry was that a company like Dell was they were paying massive sums to either bespoke development houses to build a system to help them to measure their greenhouse gas emissions reporting on a global basis. So one of the things we encountered was in companies like this where we approached them that they were saying that they were doing this on spreadsheets, and they had no real traceability, no processes in place or anything like that. And in one particular case, they actually showed us that their greenhouse gas emissions report for 24 countries had been printed off and sellotaped, for want of a better description, to a large boardroom table, and they were going through it with highlighters trying to find out why the numbers wouldn't reconcile, mainly because for each of the countries they were operating in there was a different set of emissions factors and energy conversion factors, and you're still talking millions of rows of data for each facility. So I just kind of, when I saw this, I was like, you just need a piece of software, just get a piece of software. And their answer was, yes, there's only one company in the world that does it, and they charge an extortionate amount per facility. And then I went on to find out that they actually need to install servers and equipment on each site. And I suppose this was 2007, and we were into the world of sort of software as a service, cloud computing. This kind of thing was starting to emerge, and even basic web portals were around for a while. So I said, look, you don't need this. This is straightforward stuff. Just put it into a web tool. And that's what kind of started. And we actually got one company actually said to me very bluntly, "Yep, you develop that. I'll buy it from you." I was like, "Yeah, great. I'll be back in 6 months." 2.5 years later, I came back.
Do you think that highlights that large companies aren't very good at innovation?
Not at all. No. In fact, one of our first customers, I won't mention names in case I get the individual I was dealing with in trouble, but I remember going to them we promised them that we'd have the first version of the software in prototype form ready for a particular date. I arrived with the view of showing them what we had done, but that it wasn't ready yet and we needed some more time. And I did that, and he still turned around and he was like, "No, look, that's great progress, that's fine, here's a check." "But it's not ready yet." "No, that's fine, here's a check." Okay, moving on. Came back 12 months later, the product was just ready then, right? So he had already paid for a year. I didn't ask for the second year, but then he said, "Oh, there's for the second year renewal." I was like, "This is fantastic, like, thank you very much." And I was like, do you know, like, you're after Dublin paying? He's like, yeah, but, you know, you guys are innovating. You're a small Irish company. You're trying to get this off the ground. We've been keeping an eye on you. So this is great to see. Well done.
Wow.
And it wasn't that we asked it. It was that they volunteered it. And they kind of said, look, we just see this as, you know, a small, like, it was €4,000, so it's not a trivial amount, but it's not a massive amount either for a large corporate. And they're a large Irish corporate as well. I found the multinationals very, very difficult to deal with in that regard, but it was the Irish companies that were excellent, to be fair.
Okay. So as you outgrew your initial offering, you decided to change your name. Is that right?
Yep.
And
much.
How did that process work? Was it painful?
Very painful. Sleepless nights, pain, a lot of wasted money.
What you learned from it? What advice would you give to people doing the same thing?
That highly paid consultants are still not as good as the people who found the business. That's the big thing. So we hired a consultant in Limerick, and then we hired a consultant in Dublin to help us with this. And neither really understood the business. Neither were really able to contribute anything, and neither of them came up with anything. So considering we were over and back to London quite a bit, we said, you know what, maybe we'll reach out to some of the London guys, and maybe they'll be able to help us even worse. So, you know, I think we wasted about €30,000 in total talking to consultants and doing various things. We were desperately trying to find a solution to this, and you know, most of the solutions that were being provided to us, we were like, you know, take this, use this name. It's a perfect name. Yes, it's a perfect name, but there's not a .com available, and the .com that is there, they won't sell it to us for anything less than 100K. So that's just not possible, right? Or else that .com that is there is a company that's not competing with us, but there would be confusion. You know, other stuff, great name, yes, there's a .com, but you can't trademark it. Yeah, yes, it's a great name, yes, there's a .com, but there's a company in Australia, which is one of our target audiences, and yes, they're not a global company, but they're there. There's all these kind of trouble and issues. Language was a huge one. One of the names we came up with when we translated it to Korean, I can't actually repeat what it meant, but it would have meant that we would definitely have not been able to use that name in Korea, okay. Or any finance department certainly would not have signed off on it. And we thought that Korea, who's going to care about Korea? Come on, just focus on, you know, the main countries we're dealing with. Literally 6 months later, we sold into Korea.
Wow.
So, you know, and it was a great little bit of business for us to kind of get.
So there's lots of considerations.
Yeah. So look, what we did in the end was got a whiteboard and started writing down words. You know, what kind of things do we stand for, and then we started joining the dots. We started circling parts of words, syllables, connecting them, and then we had, you know, there was 3 of us in the room, and one of us was on the laptop with one of the domain searching websites, and any idea we came up with, type it in, available, grand. Not sure about it, buy it anyway. It's $6, €6, just buy it. So we bought about $60 worth of domains a day for about 6 days.
Okay.
And the idea was that we weren't happy with any of them, but that we would come back to them and reconsider them, and maybe they might grow on us and this kind of thing. So, so we eventually came up with Accuvio, which is made up from accuracy and the past participle of the Spanish word to visualize, which is vio. So even if we found a word that didn't make sense in English, we looked up the Spanish, the French, the German translation of it, even the Chinese translation of it. We looked up pronunciations, and maybe you could convert that back into English. That's how we came up with Accuvio. And the interesting thing I find is that we found Accuvio and we found Accuvi, right, without the O at the end. And we had both, and we were unsure what are we going to do, but we went with Accuvio, and we had just launched the website, and maybe 3 or 4 days after we launched the website, we were contacted by a company in the Middle East who offered to buy the Accuvio.com domain off us, but we had already launched. We told all our customers. We had done this big publicity kind of thing in London where we ran an event, and we had all this kind of done. We couldn't very well turn around and say, no, we want to change it again. Because that would be hugely embarrassing, especially after going through trademark checks and international checks and doing all this. So we just couldn't. But what I did do was I turned around to the guy and I said, well, look, I'm not selling you Accuvio, but we have got 59 other really, really good names, which you should really have a look at. And he picked out Acuvio, and he paid us $10,000 for it.
Well,
yeah.
They said there could be a spin-off company for helping naming companies.
No. No. There's
Going for a headache.
No. For the amount of time I put in, I would be very, very poor.
So you more than paid for your time anyway.
Oh yeah,
with
I
that.
mean,
That's
look,
great.
it paid for all of the domains. It paid for the website. It paid for a good bit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously, the change in your offering necessitated the change of name. But did the new name have any positive spin-offs once you had it?
Yeah, so totally. I mean, so many really. I couldn't tell you all of them. But I mean, just the change, the way we marketed ourselves on the basis of the change by simply telling people that, the reason we're changing is because our offering is broader. Suddenly everyone was back to us. Well, how is it different? Okay. And they were on our website and they were reading through things and they were like, oh, cool. We're already one of your customers. We didn't know you did water. Then we kind of identified a shortcoming in our internal marketing, our internal sales. So it was really, really helpful in that regard. But also, a lot of people actually really, really like the name. I mean, one or two brands have actually approached us on the basis of, we asked them openly, why did you choose us over the other competitors? Your logo is pretty sweet.
Really?
Yeah, your logo is pretty sweet, is what one company actually told me. I was like, well, I'm hoping you enjoy the product and the product does what it says in the tin and and so on. Oh yeah, of course, but we were comparing you against two other very closely rivaled companies.
So tell us a bit about the product. How has it evolved from the early days? What do you do now?
Yeah, so what we do effectively is we provide a software solution to help large multinationals measure and report their greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability. So what does that mean? We take in a lot of data from energy meters, from vehicles, from fleet management systems, building management systems, travel and expense systems, waste systems, you name it. We take in feeds from about 200 or 300 different types of systems. And we take all of that data and firstly we clean it, because a lot of it comes in and it's crap, right? It's got gaps in it, holes in it. And we have some sort of artificial intelligence and sort of clever things going on in the background that cleans all that data and then presents it back to the user, all converted into a thing called CO2 equivalent, which is kind of the greenhouse gas emissions version of a currency exchange, for want of a better description. But we also kind of take in corporate social responsibility metrics. So we help companies measure, the amount of days globally that they spend with local charities, how much money they give to local charitable organizations, how much money they spend in the local communities of where they're based, that kind of stuff, as well as all of the environmental stuff. So we compile all of that and we put it into reports that they can use for either internal marketing, internal reporting, and external marketing, as well as external legislative driven reporting initiatives. So it's all very boring, in terms of if you're talking about starting a company, you kind of want to have something like Stripe and these kind of guys, But
you're providing a solution to a problem, right?
Yeah, and I mean there's no shortage of demand on it either. So it's people identify that the problem is there and they know, I think the problem we face is that people just don't know that there is a solution to this. And once we actually tell them that there's a solution, they're like, oh, thank God, finally,
Okay. So tell us about the evolution of your sales, your marketing. Did you start off selling to Irish companies? And if so, when was the first market outside Ireland?
Yeah, so we started off in the depths of a recession, which was difficult. We spent 6 months trying to sell into Irish companies or Irish-based multinationals. How we approached them is a question I get asked a lot by startups, and basically we picked up the phone, and we would contact in our space we would contact the subject matter expert, which would be the environmental director or the environmental manager, and we would openly call them up and just say, look, we're starting a new company, we're building a product, we'd love to come and talk to you just to understand what you would need from a product like this. And we did that, and we would learn a huge amount, and then we would maybe keep them in touch with what we're doing over time. We'd keep maybe showing them screenshots of what we're developing or how our specification was changing, and take on board some of their feedback. And ultimately we just stayed in their mindset. And then towards the end, then we kind of started to ramp, and we were like, okay, well look, the product is going to be ready in 3 months. Product is going to be ready in 2 months. I'd love to come and see you, show you the product. No problem at all. So many people were hugely helpful in the early days, and then they were saying, yeah, I'd love to see the product. Put the product in front of them, and because of all the cutbacks and everything, a lot of companies were just simply not able to buy because our product was new. It was something that it wasn't in the budget. There was little or no understanding of, particularly at the finance level, of why they should spend any money on sustainability, when the van outside is broken down. We need that van in order to, do deliveries. And that was a very legitimate thing. So we found it very, very difficult. We got a handful of Irish clients after about 6 months of trying, and then what actually happened was we did quite a good job in one of our clients, and Independent News and Media, and then through a friend of a friend, they referred us to a company in the UK, and that company in the UK called us and said, look, we'd love to see your product. So I flew over to London, barely had the price for the flight, got over there, did the demonstration, agreed a price there and then. There was no work for us to do in terms of implementation. It was literally switch it on. So I almost felt guilty at the time for taking this company's money. I was like, I'm taking your money and turning on the product, and now I'm done. This feels wrong. But at the same time, walking out the door, I was skipping down the line, kind of saying, this is why software as a service is awesome. This is why I got into this. Now I just need to do that a lot more. And so through that, they referred us to another UK company, and they referred us on and so forth. And the key thing for us was do a really, really super job for your customer, your first customer, and you'll get your second. And do a super job for them, and you'll get your third.
And it sounds like you took their feedback on board and iterated fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We weren't afraid to ask them what did they think is crap about the product.
Okay.
And it was a challenge in the UK market. Sometimes they weren't as, let's say, upfront and honest about that. They would say, "Oh no, it's perfect," even though you knew it wasn't. It wasn't.
Okay.
So you really had to
tease it out.
Yeah, but you can say things to them in certain ways that would kind of extract that information. Yeah.
So you were bootstrapping at this stage?
Yeah. So at the same time, we were trying to get some investors over the line, but at the time, you've got to remember in the context, this was 20. So we had founded the business in 2009, depths of a recession. We were talking to investors all of 2009, all of 2010, and we were really getting nowhere. Investors in Ireland were more interested in putting money into companies that just had cash flow issues, but they were viable businesses. They knew they'd get their money back. They knew that companies were coming to investors and saying, "Look, the bank won't give me money because the bank is on its knees. Can you give me money?" And they were saying, "Yeah, you're a safe bet. You've been trading for 20 years. You've got this, you've got that. So there you go." Whereas we're coming as a startup and we're saying, "We're starting a business in the middle of a recession. Will you back us?" And they're like, "No." So we finally got funding anyway. Towards the end of 2011, start of 2012, we closed the deal, and we had to work hard to get it. VC, yeah. We couldn't get a single VC really to kind of go with it because a lot of them didn't really even understand what we were doing. So what we did manage to do was we managed to convince one VC that if we could convince another VC that it was also a good idea, that they would back us. And he kind of said, yeah, but I know from speaking to him since that he never expected me to come back. He never thought that I'd get another VC to actually say, yeah, this is a good idea. So I did. I went back to him a couple of months later and I said, "Look, I've got this other company. They're interested in backing us. And what do you think?" And he was like, "Well, I suppose I did give you my word. So, okay, let's go with this. Let's get into due diligence. Here's a term sheet." And then we got Enterprise Ireland on board, which added additional weight and gave them a certain level of kind of comfort. And I mean, great credit is due to them. I mean, Bloom Equity and Enterprise Equity, they took a chance on us when, there was very few companies at all investing in startups at the time, and these two took a chance on us in what at the time was kind of a BAMI product, BAMI idea. It was we knew that nobody in Ireland would buy this because nobody in Ireland was buying it, but everyone in the UK was buying it, and we were like, so they bought into this, they bought into us, and they supported us through the early stages, definitely, yeah.
And the Enterprise Ireland, was that model the 10% equity with a buyback?
It's the convertible loan, so CCRPs is how they invested. Yeah, so it is the 10% thing, where they're capped at 10%. So it's that one, but they always look towards exit. So assuming you get an exit, whichever is less of, there's 3 clauses in it. I can't really remember the detail, but I think it's something like either double their money back or they get 10% of the equity or some other thing as well, something like that.
But the 2 VCs combined with Enterprise Ireland gave you a decent runway to expand.
Yeah.
So you grew the product, you iterated, you listened to what the customer was saying, you were gaining business, you got the funding. What about the team? How important was that? Building the team and selecting the original co-founders?
Yeah, look, it was massive. And the 3 original founders and myself, Derek and Roy, and we didn't know each other really. But when I kind of had the kernel of the idea, I went to Derek and I said, what do you think of this? And he was like, yeah, love it. And he was like, he's in sales, corporate enterprise sales, and he kind of said, look, I can totally sell this. I'll do sales. Fantastic. So my team started to grow. And I knew, before I had spoken to him, I kind of had that in mind anyway, because I knew that he was in sales, and I knew that he was one of the people that people look up to, and he's very tech-enabled as well, so that was cool. So I said, let's go with this. Then trying to find a CTO, like I would have loved to do the CTO piece myself, but I knew that somebody had to run the business. So I said that from everything I'd read and advice I had taken from people, I kind of said, I need a CTO. And I wasn't going to be greedy about equity or anything like that. We were kind of splitting things equally. So I just asked a few people around Dell, and I said, if you were to pick somebody in Limerick that would found a business, and had to do a lot of research, who would it be? And the name Roy Meany kept coming up all over the place. Like, it was sickening how often his name came up. So I approached him with Derek, and he was skeptical at first, had to sleep on it, as he does, went home for the weekend, thought about it, and then came back after doing research and said, yeah, grand, but here's what I want. And we did a deal, and that was the founding team. And then from that, then we tried to grow a board. So we made a decision that we would have an advisory board, which would be basically people that were unpaid, that we wouldn't be paying, but were generous enough to give us their time, and that maybe at some stage in the future we'd be able to repay them in some small way.
So it's like a mentorship role.
Absolutely, yeah. So we reached out to heads of industry, really, and I mean, the head of the EPA at the time, Dr. Padraig Larkin, fantastic. He was happy. He came down to Limerick on a few occasions to sit in our board meetings and lend us his time. We had some people out from Auchinish, Alumina, who were heavily under pressure from environmental pressures, and they knew a huge amount of this area, so they were happy to give us their time as well. And there was a guy in London I met, and he was happy to give his time, and none of these guys really asked for anything in return. They were just happy to help, and they liked what we were doing, and I think they liked the team as well. They liked the spirit behind us. So, that was our advisory board. And then we identified a need then for some non-execs. We kind of felt that we needed somebody from the sector, so we reached out to a couple of companies like Eco Securities, and they liked what we were doing and put us in touch with certain people, and that's how we met PJ Brown, and he became part of our board, and he then started to work for JP Morgan Eco Securities, opened up his network. Through him then we met Ed Hanrahan, who owns Climate Care and was formerly of Expedia and Microsoft, tech background but knew climate change. So then he came on board, and you can see how it grew. And suddenly, in the space of a few months, we had gone from just me looking at a whiteboard to me looking at a whiteboard with 8 or 9 really experienced, really good guys sitting behind me. And that was a remarkable change, and it got me to change my mindset, got me to change the work ethic, just completely attacked it in a much more aggressive manner, and much more focused as well.
It kind of helped validate your idea that they were back at you.
Well, when you have people like this saying, yeah, this is a brilliant idea, you certainly my girlfriend at the time felt a lot more comfortable. She was looking at me when I said, yeah, I'm going to leave Dell. She was like, okay, yeah, I'll support you. But at the same time, I think she was thinking, oh no, what am I going to here? But she's my wife, and we have 2 children now, so so that went well.
Congratulations.
But yeah, she was really very, very patient at the early outset.
Okay, good, important. So you've been through bootstrapping and investment. What do you see as the pros and cons to both?
Right, so investment is the main difference between the two is speed. All right. You often see stories in Silicon Valley and stuff like this of a company that's maybe they came up with the idea and they've raised $10 million, grand. Find out how much the founder actually owns of it. Now, granted, you've got the age-old thing that it's better to have maybe 10% of something that's something rather than 50% of something that's nothing. And that rattles through your brain all the time. But in terms of speed, I think a combination of both is the right way to go, certainly in the Irish environment. If you have a B2B product, definitely that's the way to go. B2C is so marketing intense that speed to market is so vital. You probably need to you need to validate your product, get some sales, and then explode. With B2B, you need a longer validation cycle. much longer validation cycle. And with a B2B type product, you're gonna struggle to get investment without having some big name clients on your sales list.
So you're going 8 years now?
7.
7. What's been the high point so far in those 7 years for you personally?
I was thinking about this actually only the other day, and I think normally I would have said that some of the recent sales or recent wins that we've made in the last 12 to 18 months have been really, really good. I think a really proud moment for me was that, considering that we had such a hard time, particularly in 2012 when the business nearly went under, and we kind of rescued it. Considering everything, I would have said that actually being able to repay and buy out our investors earlier on this year was a very proud moment for me. I know our investors completely thought that they would never see that money again. Once the end of 2012 rolls around, I think they had written it off, but I think they were pleased. We were able to give them that, and that was very proud. But I think probably the highlight for me was realizing that when our second was born recently, we have 2 under 2, which brings a completely different dynamic to running a business, by the way. But when he was born in June, I was able to take 6 weeks off, and I told everyone in the office, if there's anything urgent, ring me. My phone didn't ring for 6 weeks. I actually went into the office twice just to kind of make sure that they hadn't all just disappeared. The thing ran like clockwork. Well-oiled machine. I didn't have to worry about it. Just everything ran. And then when I got back in, I had an email from 4 or 5 key people within the business giving me an update on status. And it was just, that for me was like, this is why I started the business, not for all of the nights I was working.
I was going to say, what does success look like to you? But it sounds like having 6 weeks with your 2 under 2s is what it's about, right?
Although, to be honest, I probably would have preferred to be at work. That was a tough 6 weeks. Okay. No, it was great. It really was great. Yeah, okay. Just being able to do that.
Yeah. Who are your heroes?
Yeah, so I'm obviously a big man into sports, right? So I have a few heroes in that regard. In business, it does change. I think Steve Jobs is somebody I look up to a lot. My personal life, my dad has actually been a huge influence. A lot of people are kind of surprised. My dad is a heavy diesel mechanic, so he works with big trucks. And from an early age, he's been keeping me away from it. He was always telling me to stay away from that. He doesn't want me to be a mechanic, but I learned a huge amount from him down through the years, just working with him on Saturdays, even right to this day. Like whenever I get a chance, we do some of that together. But one of the things for me was, I think I was 12 or 13, and I think I was 12 actually, and he was taking apart an engine of a Peugeot 404, and I took it apart with him, and I was labeling all the parts. We took it down to the right bones, right down to the bottom. And what I learned from that experience was that if you're organized and structured, that not only did we put it back, but we put it back with modifications in it that meant that it was actually better than the original, because he identified that there was a part that kept wearing. So rather than replace it with the bit that you would buy, he bought the bit, modified it in such a way that the wearing piece wouldn't happen again, and then installed that. And I'm sure that somewhere that engine is probably still running. But I learned from that then that no matter, all these big companies, they make mistakes too. And because we know it, if you know the use case better than anybody, because I know for a fact Peugeot didn't know how to deal with the Irish roads, but because my dad had so much experience with heavy diesel equipment on rough terrain, he knew exactly what to do and how to counteract it. And so he was able to change it. So if you understand the use case, you can actually beat a world beater like Peugeot very easily just by applying that. Okay. And that for me, I remember sitting on the pavement after realizing this and saying, right, this is awesome.
You mentioned sports there, and you're big into sports. A lot of leading lights founders in Silicon Valley sort of speak of sports and fitness and well-being being really important to their success. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. I don't think I would have gotten through all the tough times without the sport. I think just having the runners with you in the bag, is just so important when you're traveling. Just having them there, even if you don't use them, just having them there. So if you've had a really hard day, and you might get back to the hotel and it's 11 or 12 o'clock at night, just go for a run. Doesn't matter. You can always go for a run. I mean, I've run in every city that I've ever traveled to. And I've run away from people in some of the cities I've traveled to. It was a good thing I was fairly fit in one particular city, because I had to run for quite a while to get away from him. Wow. But it just in Atlanta, don't run with an iPhone. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah, so look, I had hurling, I had Gaelic football, squash and five-a-side football during the winter months. I kept it all going. Without it, I wouldn't have been able. And I think sport gives you a huge amount of energy as well, right? So I mean, you might feel drained and lethargic after a long day, and you might be tempted to sit on the couch and have a cup of tea or a biscuit. That's the time when you actually need to get up and force yourself out for a run or a walk or a jog, or pick a hill and run up it. When you know that you're absolutely knackered at the end of it, you know that the following day you're going to have more energy. And I knew then that the more exercise I did, the harder I trained on the hurling and football, the more energy I had, the smarter I was, the more alert I was.
Right.
But I felt smarter, I felt like I could do more. And it still stands today. If I have something on that's really on my mind, I will go out and run 2 or 3 days before it. And it kind of helps get it out of your head as well. So it's really, really helpful. I would say anybody who's starting a business or running a business, because of the stress that you're going to face, get into a routine of running your anxieties, running your fears, and also running the excitement out. Sometimes you get so excited about something that you get carried away with yourself, and that's good to kind of just go for a run, and it kind of levels you.
Grounding.
Yeah, it gets you right back to ground. Well, I think I was lucky. I had a good group of friends who were very quick-witted and very well able
bring
to
you down to earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, that's great advice.
Yeah.
So, talk about advice. If an investor with some serious cash said to you, "Why should I invest in Limerick?" What would you say to him?
Well, for Accuvio, we've been asked that question several times by companies we deal with in the UK. They've asked us all the time, with 70% of your business in the UK, shouldn't you really move to the UK? And for me, I explained to them very, very easily that I can get. So we have staff over in the UK, but I can actually be anywhere in the UK quicker than they can be. So we have clients in Newcastle. I can get there faster than the guys in London. I can be in London quicker than my guys that are living in Oxford can be in London. If I leave home at 6 a.m. For a 7 o'clock flight from Ryanair, I can be in the city centre in London for about 9:30. Our office is right beside Liverpool Street station, so it's really easy. If they leave at 7 from Oxford, they'll probably be in 5 or 10 minutes before me. So that puts it in context. The other side of the coin, Shannon is a key thing. Shannon Airport, even if a flight doesn't go from Shannon, Cork, it's only a couple of hours away. Dublin, it's only a couple of hours away. But Shannon's a big thing for me. The other thing is, when you compare operating costs. So some of my friends are running businesses in Dublin. They find it really hard to retain staff. They find it really hard to get staff. And it makes them uncompetitive as well, because they're competing with a lot more multinational companies than we have to compete with here in Limerick. Yes, we do compete with Uber for staff, we compete with Dell, we're competing with WP Engine. We compete with all these kind of companies that have arrived in, and yes, they have much more on offer. But in a small company, what we found and we continue to find is that anybody who leaves us typically wants to come back. That small company environment. Our developers work on stuff that they would never work on in a multinational. Our sales and support people, they have a variety of work things that in a large corporate they would never get to do. The opportunities that you have in a smaller company like ours are just endless by comparison to a multinational. And when you look at Dublin, in particular, is one where we see it all the time. It's just so challenging for startups in Dublin by comparison to how it is in Cork or in Limerick. And even larger multinationals, if they're looking for a place to go, being in Limerick gives them access to a lot more in terms of access to the rest of the country. Galway one way, Limerick the other, Dublin the other way direction. And you've got an international airport that takes 20 minutes to get from door to door.
Yeah. There's a famous question that Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, asks. You might have heard of when he's interviewing people and when he's speaking to people about potential investment. And I'm going to put it to you. It's, tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Ooh. God, if I got that in that interview, I definitely wouldn't have got it anyway.
Or I guess another way of putting it is, what have you a strong belief in that most people disagree with you on?
God, it's a hard one to answer.
Hard one.
I don't know. I think I had an interesting conversation with somebody recently, actually, which you might find funny, and it's probably a bit out there, right? But he was making the argument to me that this concept of ancient aliens, that we're not the first civilization to live on this planet, and that there was a civilization before us and it was wiped out. I find that fascinating, the idea of it. So I watched a few of the videos. It turns out there's not a few videos, there's an entire 11 series of this stuff that is on the Discovery Channel. Fascinating stuff.
Wow.
It's well out there. I don't talk to my friends about it because they'll think I'm, completely wacko. But it's an interesting one to look at.
Well, it's original thinking, and apparently the object of Thiel's question is to identify original thinking in his candidates. So, okay. What 3 tips would you give for Limerick startups setting out on their journey now from your last number of years' experience?
Depends on the stage they're at, right? So, if you're at a very early stage where you just have an idea, the first thing I would tell people, I suppose, is that I've met people who have left their job in the pursuit of this idea without validating the market first, or without researching their competition. So I would say, before you do anything like that, I would say research the market, understand your competition. Use any advantage you can at that point in time, at that specific point in time, to actually get a look at your product, your competitor's product. Use any advantage that you can in order to understand the market. Go and talk to people completely without them knowing that you're looking at building this business, but go and talk to them and ask them, how much of a pain is this for you, or how interesting is this? And I suppose I'm speaking on the B2B perspective. B2C, it's a bit more difficult, but that would be in the very early stages. If you get past that phase and then you're saying, right, okay, there's something here I want to do about it, the next thing you need to do is you need to get a team together. And what I would say to people when you're building a team is look for people that are definitely better than you at whatever it is they do, or whatever you want them to do. If you're talking to a guy and you are firmly of the belief that you are actually better than him at what you're asking him to do, then you've got the wrong guy. You have to continue to look for people who are better than you. I mean, we use it as one of our hiring criteria. If we're hiring somebody for a particular task, I ask myself the question, can this person do that job better than I can? And if the answer is yes, then they get offered. If not, they don't. Okay. Very, very simple.
Great advice.
So the team is the second one. Very, very important. And on the team, I think it's important. I see a huge mistake a lot, and it's the biggest thing. People contact me and they tell me that they have this problem with their team. And the problem is that they've got 2 or 3 members, but one of the members can't leave full-time employment or can't give the commitment that the other member has given until the company either secures investment or secures sales and all the rest of it. Establish that stuff early on. Talk about that stuff early on. Have what-if scenarios. Have an agreement, even if it's just a gentleman's agreement. We did that amongst ourselves, between myself, Derek, and Roy, and we followed it. We met with that, or we used that gentleman's agreement, to settle any differences. And it was not a penalty, but it was an enabler, because a couple of companies have come to me recently, and one of them is in the UK, and they're a particular sorry case in that, because one guy can't commit, one of the other guys has decided, well, I'm not doing anything more until he comes back. And the whole company is just gone now. Really, it's incredibly disappointing. And all it really takes is if they had some sort of a mechanism in place to kind of deal with these kind of things, then everyone would be happy.
Okay.
And I think the third thing then, so understand your competition, do your market research, get your team right, and finance at the right time, I think is the third one. We talk about funding, and we talk about this investor-ready business plan, and one of the mistakes I made was I spent a huge amount of time in the early days chasing investors, when really I keep asking myself the question, if I'd spent the same amount of time chasing customers, would I have ever needed investment? And I keep asking myself that question, and I think the answer is probably no, I wouldn't have needed investment. Right. But I'll never know.
Right.
And that's the kind of intriguing thing for me, is that, at some stage in the future, I'll be working on another startup, and that's the challenge I'm going to set myself.
Okay.
But at the same time, some products, depending on the product and depending on the market, there's no other way around it. You're going to need investment. You're going to need it. Yeah. But when I talk about investment, I talk about knowledge investment more so than I talk about financial investment. When people talk about investment, they're always talking about cold hard cash. But if you have a non-exec or a mentor or somebody who's just done it before and they're telling you to do X, Y, and Z, you would probably, if you had the money, you would probably have spent 100K understanding and learning that lesson. But they're telling you it there and then for free. So just take the advice. So that knowledge capital is worth far more.
Brilliant. Really, three really solid pieces of advice. Thanks very much. Before we turn to the audience for Q&A, just want to go back to like your roots. So you started off coding, and I know you told me you were one of the founders of the Limerick Coderdojo.
Yeah.
You might be interested to know on Saturday in LIT they're having their second mega dojo, and they're aiming for 1,024 coding kids. Significantly, 1,024.
We had 24 there on the first day.
Right. You must think it's amazing what's happened in the short number of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. It gives me a huge amount of pride as well. I mean, I'm not involved in it anymore, and the guys have done huge work, particularly Eugene in Limerick, and Russ, a painter in Ennis as well, has done a fantastic job. And it's great, right? I mean, where it really hit home for me is I haven't been involved in it for about, I was involved in it for the first 2 years, and then I stepped away because the business needed me, and I needed to focus on that. But for the last 4 years, it was kind of watching. I was taking watching brief, but what was really pleasing for me was last summer, one of the guys, one of my cousins, who was 11 or 12 when I brought him to Coderdojo. He was at the very first Coderdojo, and he learned a huge amount in that, and it got him hooked onto technology completely. And over the following years, he has been sending me emails. I'm doing this, I'm coding that. I've got this problem. I'm building an app. I'm doing this. And I was watching this, and I had lit this fire in this guy, and he was just really, really good at it. And the emails I'm getting from him, he was asking some very, very complex coding questions. So, last summer he was on, he was fourth year in school, and he came to me and he said, "Can I have a job?" And I was like, "How age are you?" He says, "I turn 16 tomorrow." Okay, yeah. What do you want to do? And I want to be a coder. I want to work with the team. I was like, okay, well look, we'll get you to come in and do a bit of testing. Came in. Was part of a 3-person team to develop and deliver an app to the market that was done in 3 months. And he was probably the lead coder in the project because he was the only one of the 3 that had actually worked on mobile stuff in the past. And he was just brilliant. And the quality of his code was second to none. I mean, I have developers that have qualifications and experience coming out of their ears, and they were looking at some of the code and some of the stuff this guy was coding, and they were just like, yeah, no, look, outstanding. Yeah. So that was huge to kind of see, kind of going from one end to the other.
Absolutely. Can you all join me in thanking Adrian for some great insights?